right. Well, it's really good to see you all. Glad you're here. I wonder, just curious. Anyone remember the show Lost, the TV show Lost? Any fans of Lost out there? So Amanda and I, we became huge fans of the show Lost back in the day when it was actually a new show. In fact, we didn't really discover it until it was already in its third season, and so we had to binge watch the first two seasons of Lost before binge watching was even a thing. Because this was like before even Netflix was around, and so, or any streamers like that. So we actually had to rent the DVDs from Blockbuster. Remember Blockbuster? Yeah, talk about a blast from the past. So that's how we got into the TV show Lost, was through the DVDs. And we became a huge, like I said, super fans of the show Lost. In fact, I would say, for me personally, it's still like in my top 5. It's a great show. But there's this great line, this kind of like iconic moment that happens in the very first season of Lost. If you've seen it, then I'm sure you remember this. It's when Jack Shepherd, who's like the doctor, he's like the default leader of the group. And there's some like turmoil, right? There's like some division happening within the camp, and the survivors are divided on different things. He's trying to keep everybody together, maintain the unity, and he gives one of his classic lines. He says, "If we can't live together, we'll die alone." Kind of in his classic melodramatic, Jack Shepherd way. But I remember hearing that and watching that scene and thinking, wow, that was like a mic drop moment. And I remember thinking even then, like, this had to have been like 18, 19 years ago, like, that'll preach. And so I've been sitting on that one for a little while, finally using that. But it's this great thought, right? Live together, die alone. And if I could just sort of underscore that thought even further, I came across this story a while back of an elderly woman in Italy who had lived alone. She kind of kept to herself. And after a couple of years, her friends and her neighbors hadn't really seen her, heard from her. They just all assumed that she moved away during the pandemic. But then one day the police checked in on the house because there were some overgrown trees and things that needed tending. And so they let themselves in, and they found her sitting at her dining room table in the exact same position she was in when she died nearly 2 years earlier. And I mean, 2 years, like that, this shook the community. They were rattled by this. Like, how could we let this happen? In fact, one of the local officials went to Facebook and posted this later that day, I think. She said, what happened to her, the forgotten loneliness, hurts our consciences. We have a duty, she said, as a community that wants to remain united, to remember her life. And then she closed with this. She said, no one must be left alone. In fact, the article called this woman loneliness personified. Now, I know that's kind of an extreme example, right? But it actually highlights something that I think is very real and very common, and it's a struggle in our world today, because the truth is that loneliness is everywhere. It's everywhere. We've been in this message series for the past several weeks now, really going back to Easter, talking about the challenges that we all experience on different levels when it comes to our mental health. A series called Resurrecting Hope. And we've been coming back to this idea, the kind of this simple but profound thought, this idea that our mental health is deeply impacted by what or who we tie our hope to, right? And the truth is that we often tie our hope to things or people or outcomes that don't always come through for us in the ways that we hope they will. And when that happens, it doesn't just shake our hope, but it can actually leave us feeling forgotten, abandoned. It can even leave us feeling unseen, right? And in fact, I came across this really interesting description or definition of loneliness that I thought was really helpful for us today. This person says it's the state of being unseen or unnoticed, relationally, mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. It can be driven by lack of purpose or meaning, relationship, and or identity, and is marked by a deep sense of hopelessness. So this goes much deeper than just being alone, doesn't it? In fact, just based on that description, I think it's quite possible for us to be surrounded by a crowd of people and yet still feel lonely. And I'm sure many of us have had that experience. We know what that feels like. And as I thought about this, it just makes me wonder how many of us are experiencing some kind of loneliness today. And that can show up in a lot of different forms. In fact, I came up with a few of these, and so maybe for us, we're experiencing some kind of loneliness like this, like maybe it's a seasonal loneliness. We've just entered a new chapter in our life, and maybe that looks like an empty nest. Maybe it looks like a loss, or a breakup, or maybe a move. Whatever it is, life just looks different, and it can feel lonely. Maybe it's this one. Maybe we find ourselves in what I call a success-driven loneliness, or what we might call kind of like a positional loneliness, right? Because maybe in our workplace we're in a position of authority or a position of leadership. We're making decisions. We have responsibilities, and so it's like, when do you have the opportunity to just take the boss hat off and just unwind for a minute and just be real with the people around you? And there's a lot of truth to that old saying that we've probably all heard, that it's lonely at the top, right? Maybe we find ourselves there, or maybe we find ourselves in what I've just called a secrecy loneliness. Secrecy. Maybe whether it's a wound or maybe a failure in our past or maybe some kind of habit in our life, if there's something that we've kept hidden deep inside, then we have this natural tendency to want to stay hidden from others. Right? And that just keeps continuing to bring up this old nagging question kind of again and again in our minds, like, if people really knew me, would they really love me? So maybe it's that, or maybe it's just what we find ourselves in one of these, what I call a self-imposed loneliness. It's a loneliness of our own choosing, right? Because, we're the ones who choose to spend so much time with our face in our screens. Right? We're the ones that choose to put so much emphasis on digital interaction over real life human connections. Right? Or we're the ones who have propped up and made the choice to kind of elevate this sense like, I am an individual, I'm independent, I can do this on my own, I don't need any help from anyone else. We make these kind of choices all the time, and they're only keeping us disconnected, disengaged, and they're just keeping us lonely. And the truth is that any one of us can be experiencing a loneliness like this right now, even in a room where we're surrounded by people. Because again, loneliness isn't just about the absence of people, it's the perceived absence of meaningful connection. And this has a profound impact on our mental health, as you can imagine. Right? We're talking depression, anxiety, cognitive decline. They've even associated this with higher risk of dementia in older adults. All of this has been linked back to chronic loneliness. Furthermore, hearing your pastor talk about all of this is a leading cause of stress on a Sunday morning. Sorry, I'm not bringing a whole lot of uplifting stuff right now. A lot of bad news when it comes to loneliness, right? But it's not just our mental health. This actually impacts our physical health as well. One doctor said that loneliness is so bad for us, he actually compared it to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's a similar impact on our physical health. All of these findings led former U.S. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy to say this in a very recent interview. He said this. He said, well, it turns out that our connection with one another, this is not just a nice thing to have. It's biologically an imperative for us. It's something we need for survival, just like we need food and water. And as soon as I read that, I thought, well, he's not even the first one to say that, right? In fact, I seem to recall a very similar statement that was published thousands of years earlier by the leading authority on human health and wellness. It's not good for man to be alone, right? Right there. Genesis 2:18, God said that. And so as we kind of turn a corner into the rest of the message this morning, I just want to say this, that if you're feeling this ache of loneliness today, I want you to know that you're not weird, right? You're not somehow less than, but you're human. In fact, this is something we've been saying throughout this series, because everything we've been talking about, these challenges, these struggles associated with our mental health, these are just so much a part of the human experience, and loneliness is really no different. So the question for us is then, how do we lessen the ache of loneliness that any one of us might be experiencing right now? Because the reality is we need more than just surrounding ourselves with more people. What we need is to be seen, to be known, and to be truly loved. So Jesus was often surrounded by people, right? We just look at his life. We see this. He just had a way of drawing a crowd, right? And on one of those occasions, this crowd was especially dense. It was tight. They were pressing in all around. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of people just trying to get close to Jesus on this particular day. And among the crowd was one woman who was surrounded by all these people and yet completely alone. And she was there in the crowd on this occasion, driven by one hope that maybe Jesus could do for her in this moment what no one else could. And so Mark, one of the earliest followers of Jesus, actually captured this for us. And we read it here in Mark chapter 5, verse 25. Here's what it says. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. She had suffered a great deal under the care of many doctors and had spent all she had, yet instead of getting better, she grew worse. When she heard about Jesus, she came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak because she thought, if I just touch his clothes, I will be healed. We're going to pause there for just a second. We're going to come back to her story here in a moment. But here's the sad reality when it comes to this woman. This is really all we know about her, right? Just in these few verses, apparently the disciples who were there and observed all of this, witnessed all of this happening, they didn't think to get her name, right? So she just shows up as kind of this anonymous woman in the scriptures with this health condition. But from these few verses, we actually learn a lot about her loneliness. And the first thing we learn is that her loneliness was physical suffering. Physical suffering. One of the first things that we discover is that she's been hemorrhaging for 12 years, and we don't know exactly what that meant. It's kind of vague. There's a lot of different theories on what that could have been for her, but whatever it was uncontrollable and incurable, and it was slowly killing her. And so there's the physical pain that comes with all of that, but then there's also the emotional impact that comes with this, because, it says that she had been to all these doctors. Right? She had gone to all these doctors in search of answers, right? In search of healing and really in search of some kind of hope. But at the end of all that, it just left her disappointed again and again. And on top of that, it just left her destitute. She's broke. And so it just makes you wonder how she had endured all this as long as she did, right? Because of this physical suffering. But then her loneliness was also, on top of that, it was social rejection. Social rejection. Here's what we know about this woman, just based on the cultural backdrop. Because she was living with this condition, it would have meant that she was what they called unclean, according to the culture of her people. Right? She was ceremonial. Let me get this right. Ceremonially unclean, according to the laws. And in fact, on top of that, according to those same laws, anybody who came in contact with her would have also been unclean. In fact, anyone who came in contact with anything that she had touched would have been considered unclean. And so this meant that no one could really get close enough to this woman to touch her, to have any kind of interaction with her, because even just being in her presence would have somehow caused them to be also ritually, ceremonially unclean. I didn't struggle with that the last service. I don't know what's going on. But they would have been unclean as well. So that meant no public appearances, no religious gatherings, not even for worship. It would have meant no family, most likely no husband, no children. Right? This woman had lived in total isolation, cut off from society and any form of community for 12 long years. That's what she'd been enduring. And all of this led to her loneliness becoming this spiritual desperation. She was desperate. Right? She had tried everything. She had exhausted all of her resources. And nothing had worked up to this point, and time was running out. And so when she heard that this miracle worker named Jesus was coming into town, she was like, what have I got to lose? So she did the unthinkable and the unacceptable. She went into the crowd. She literally broke the law. And on top of that, she compromised the ritual purity of every person in that crowd, including Jesus. And it's interesting, did you notice that she came up behind Jesus, right? Like she's sneaking up behind Jesus, because it's like she wanted to get close to him, just close enough to touch his robe, but she didn't actually want to be seen or noticed in the process. You know, she's like, just get in there, get healed, and get out. Like, that's her whole plan. That's her whole strategy. But this encounter with Jesus led to so much more than she even anticipated and could even hope for. Because she came looking for one kind of healing, but Jesus gave her something far more holistic. He gave her a healing that was, first of all, physical. He gave her the physical healing. We continue in her story, picking up with verse 29 now. It says, immediately her bleeding stopped, and she felt in her body that she was freed from her suffering. And so this is why she's there, right? This is what she came for. She got to Jesus, she touched his robe, and immediately the bleeding stops. She knows it, she can feel it in her body, right? She's been healed. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she was physically whole again. But it wasn't just physical. Her healing was also personal. Jesus makes it personal here. Picking up again with verse 30. It says at once, Jesus realized that power had gone out from him. He turned around in the crowd and asked, "Who touched my clothes?" "You see the people crowding against you," his disciples answered, "and yet you can ask, 'Who touched me?'" But Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. And again, I find this so interesting because, she just wanted to slip away quietly, secretly, anonymously, just get lost in the crowd. Again, that was her whole plan that day, but Jesus wouldn't let it happen, right? He wouldn't let her get away and disappear so easily. And even when the disciples were kind of annoyed by this, they're like, "Jesus, what are you talking about? There's literally dozens, if not hundreds of people touching you right now, and you want to know who just touched you." But he's relentless. He's relentless because he wants to know who did it. He wants to see who did it. He wants to really see them. And so finally she comes forward, terrified and trembling, right? And can you just imagine what was going on in her thoughts and in her mind right now? Because think about this. She had all these years of living in pain, just cut off and rejected because of this physical condition she had. And then she had risked everything to be in the crowd that day just to get up close to Jesus. And now he's calling her out. And so in her mind, she's probably thinking, what's he going to do? What's he going to say right now in front of all these people? What's going to happen? And I love this about Jesus. This is so Jesus in this moment, because he's not calling her out to shame her. That's not what he wants to do here. He wants to make a personal connection with her. He wants to make sure more than anything that she is and feels seen, like truly seen in this moment. And so her healing was as personal as it was physical, but it was also relational. It was relational. Look at verse 34, last verse here we're going to look at. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." Now, I think it's worth mentioning here that and I think it's interesting because Jesus, he says, it's your faith. He tells her, your faith has healed you. And again, thinking back to what compelled her to be in that moment, and her whole plan was just to touch his robe. If I can just touch his robe. And when she did, she was healed. But Jesus is like, listen, there's nothing mystical or magical about the clothes that I'm wearing. That's not what healed you. It's your faith, he says. Your faith in me is what did it. That's what did it. And no, your faith isn't perfect. It's not perfect, but it's enough. And so Jesus wants to make that clear, wants to make that point. But what I find so beautiful in this moment, look at what Jesus calls her. Daughter. Daughter. That's the only place in Scripture where Jesus does this. He calls her daughter, and it's a powerful declaration of her true identity from that moment forward. So it's like, so what if we don't know her name? Right? Jesus calls her daughter, and with that one word, he gives back what 12 years had taken away from her, right? Her dignity, her identity, and most importantly, her place within the family of God. And so I just imagine, just trying to visualize this scene. I just imagine her kneeling there in the crowd, looking up at Jesus, her face just wet with tears, and for the first time in years, maybe for the first time in her life, feeling not only seen, but feeling known and feeling loved. Feeling loved. And then Jesus says to her, "Go in peace." Go in peace. And he's not just talking about relief from anxiety. Because the word that Jesus actually used for peace here, it's something much deeper than that. It means wholeness. It actually means to be complete. And to take it on to an even deeper level, it actually means to be restored into a right relationship with God. This healing that Jesus provided for her in this moment was relationally, first and foremost, with God. Right? Jesus didn't just heal her physically, but personally and relationally. He responded to her loneliness with holistic care and concern. And here's the beauty of what we see happening in this moment, and Jesus is still doing this with you and I today, but this is really what it boils down to, that Jesus heals what's broken in us, but he also restores what's broken between us. He heals what's broken in us, but then restores what's broken between us. He meets us in our loneliness, first and foremost, with himself. Right? And that means that God is present and at work in your life right now and always. And all those places where you feel brokenness and wounds and pain, both physically and emotionally, God sees all of that, and he's working. He's working. And as followers of Jesus, we live with this hope that we are never alone. He is with us. He sees us. He knows us, and he loves us. And then he places us in community with others where we can be seen and known and loved. And that is the church. That's what this was always meant to be, a community of deep relational belonging. Because the reality is that you and I were never meant to do this alone, right? In fact, Dr. Murthy, he can say his thing about how we're biologically wired and how important this is and all that. He can speak from a medical perspective, and it's all true, but it's true because God has been saying it from the very beginning. It's not good for man to be alone. We were never meant to do this alone. And because Jesus heals what's broken in us and restores what's broken between us, the wonderful news for us today is that we don't have to do this alone. So a lot of you know this already because I talk about my story quite a bit. And about 2.5 years ago, a little over 2.5 years ago, we moved, our family, Amanda and I, and we moved down here to be part of Cypress and all that God is doing here. We're incredibly grateful for that. We love being a part of this community. But prior to coming down here, we had spent the better part of 20 years in a small city in Indiana that was roughly, comparable to St. Pete, very comparable in terms of size of population and things like that. But because of the positions that we had on staff at the churches that we served up there, both relatively large churches, and just because of the time that we had spent in that community, it wasn't uncommon for us to go anywhere around town and see people that we knew, right? And it could have been downtown, could have been any side of town, even some of the communities surrounding town. We would see people that we knew. In fact, sometimes people would recognize us and walk up and say hi and things like that. And it always felt good. It's like, man, this is our town. We feel connected, we feel known. And there was always a good feeling with that. But then on a much deeper level, we had some great, incredibly deep relationships with people in that community, with some of them. In fact, just couples, families that we did life with for a lot of years. In some cases, our kids have grown up together. We've done trips together. We've done ministry and things like that together for a lot of years. And it was just these rich and life-giving relationships that were surrounding us as part of that community up there. And so 2.5 years ago, we moved down here. And of course, we left all of those friendships, all of our family, all of that community back there. And I don't know why I was surprised at different times to experience some real loneliness as a result of that move. And I'm not saying any of this so you'll feel sorry for me, or for Amanda, but really just to say we get it, right? I mean, I think all of us have had an experience like this, and so we're like, yeah, us too. We understand, and I think this probably hit home hardest for us at the end of last summer. We just got back from our travels up north with family and things like that, and we got home and we realized, there's just something missing. We've got some lovely community, connections and with all of you, and we love that, but what was missing was really this deeper community, these deeper connections and relationships, and we just realized we've got to do something a little different here in this next season. And so part of that was we became part of a small group. And we've got members of our small group here. And we've loved being a part of that small group, of starting in the fall. And we've not been as consistent in the spring, but that's mostly my fault. But we've loved being a part of that group. And then we've even reached out to people outside of Cypress, and we've formed some relationships there, which has been really good. And we've opened our home on a number of occasions, just a few occasions. And these have been incredibly important steps for us that have helped us to feel more and more connected. And we know we've got a lot of room to grow in this. But I share that with you because it's reminded me of something that I've come to know through experience. The reality is the community doesn't always come to you. But we can come to community pretty much any time. And I know that's going to look different in different seasons of life, wherever we may find ourselves, but the truth is, the reality is that we can come to community almost any time. And yes, it takes time. We're experiencing that. And yes, it can feel risky, but in the end, it is so worth it. And so for any one of us who might be walking through some loneliness today, in this season, whatever that looks like, here's the invitation for us. Take the risk to be known. Take that risk. This is exactly what we see the woman in Mark 5 doing. And we see how it changed everything for her. And we can just briefly go back and retrace her story to learn from her example. Think back. She had this incredible courage, right? This tremendous courage, because she could have just slipped away like she wanted to. She could have chosen to fly under the radar, just stay anonymous. None of us would have blamed her for doing that, but she had the courage to step forward when Jesus called her out. And anytime we have the opportunity to step into community, it's going to take courage. It's going to take a lot of courage, and including showing up to church for the first time, right? And so if we have any first-time guests with us, or anybody who's in your first 5 tries, I just want to pause and take a moment to acknowledge that courage, your courage this morning, because that is a huge step, and it takes a lot of guts, and we're so glad that you're here. And hopefully we've made this a very safe place for you, welcoming place for you in Cypress. This is something you do incredibly well. But we're so glad. But really, it takes courage to step into this. But on top of that, this woman in Mark chapter 5, she was unbelievably vulnerable. Right? She came forward and told Jesus. It says here, it's interesting, she told him the whole truth. She didn't just step forward and say it was me. She gave him the whole unfiltered story. She laid it all out there right in front of everyone. And here's the thing. Jesus didn't correct her. He didn't scold her or shame her. Instead, he just went out of his way to make sure that she felt seen and known and deeply loved. Vulnerability, we know this. Vulnerability is intimidating, right? It's super scary. It's uncomfortable, but it's absolutely necessary for us to be truly seen and known. And so for us to experience this, we're going to have to take the masks off. We're going to have to be willing to be our authentic, unfiltered selves. And then the third thing here is that she had humility. This woman displayed some incredible humility here. When she comes back to Jesus, it says that she falls to her knees, right? This gesture of surrender and humility. She's literally placing herself at his mercy. And in a similar way, we have to have that same kind of humility to admit, I can't do this on my own. I literally need other people in my life. In essence, we're putting ourselves at their mercy, at the mercy of these relationships. We need that. And what we're really saying here, in this moment of humility, what we're really saying, I need Jesus. I need Jesus first and foremost in my life. And I need his community surrounding me. We need each other. We need to come to that place of humility, but here's the last thing. This woman, she took the initiative, right? She took the initiative. She didn't wait for somebody to reach out to her, but she saw her moment of opportunity and she went for it. She reached out to Jesus. And I love what Jenny Allen wrote in her book called Find Your People. She says this when it comes to making these connections. She says, connection takes stepping out and being intentional again and again. Be the one who reaches out. Initiate and initiate again. You can't expect to have friends unless you get good at this, even though it's frustrating and it's awkward. When it comes to our human relationships, connection starts with intention. We take the risk. We make the first move. And it's awkward sometimes, and it's never perfect. But that's how we build real, lasting community. One courageous, vulnerable, humble step at a time. And we can take the initiative. But here's the beauty in all of this. And it's so powerful. Because Jesus took the ultimate initiative with us. He doesn't wait for us to come to him. He comes to us, and he finds us right in the middle of our loneliness and our pain and our fear. He doesn't wait for us to clean ourselves up or to get our theology all lined up in proper order, but he meets us where we are, and he calls us daughter. He calls us son. He calls us his. And he frees us from our suffering and our shame. So this morning we're going to close with the time of communion and a song that we've never sung here called Another in the Fire. It's a great song, and it's a song that's kind of inspired by the story from the book of Daniel. These three men that were taken from their homeland, and they were forced to live under the rule of this foreign king. And when they refused to bow down to the king's idol, they were thrown into this blazing fire. But as the flames were engulfing them, something miraculous kind of happens here, because the king looks into the furnace expecting to see three guys burning up, but instead he sees four men in the fire. He's looking at this fourth man. The scriptures say the fourth man looked like a son of the gods. And what we understand about this story is that it was Jesus in the fire with those men. Jesus was with them. And that's the powerful picture that we carry into this moment, that Jesus is with you. He's with you in the trial, in the fear, in the anxiety, in the loneliness. He is with you. You are never alone. He's found you, and he has freed you from shame and from suffering and from isolation. One of my favorite lines in this song is part of the chorus that we're going to hear in just a little bit, but it says, if I ever need reminding of how I've been set free, there is a cross that bears my burden where another died for me. That's what communion reminds us of today. The bread reminds us that Jesus gave his body for us, wounded and torn open so that we could be healed. And the cup reminds us of his blood that flowed from those wounds for the forgiveness of our sins. Through his suffering and through his sacrifice, we are made whole and welcomed home. And so in these next few moments, as the band, or as Taylor and Jose lead us, you're invited to come forward, receive the bread and the cup. We've got elders up here at the front, so just come to the one closest to you. Take the bread and the cup back to your seats and just take a moment to reflect on this. Reflect on what Jesus has done for you. His presence in your life, the healing that you've experienced as a result of it. And take some time just to express your gratitude. And then when you feel ready, you're invited to eat the bread and drink the cup on your own. At the end of the song, I'll come up to close us and to send us out of here, but let's just take a few moments to worship together.
There's a grace when the heart is under fire. Another way when the walls are closing in. When I look at the space between where I used to be and this reckoning, I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the water, holding back the sea. Should I ever need a reminder of how I've been set free, there's a cross in Bethlehem where another died for me. There's another in the fire. All my dad left for dead beneath the wall. No longer a slave to my sin anymore. Should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning? Either way, I will bow to the things of this world. Another in the fire, standing next to me. There was another in the water, holding back the sea. Should I ever need a reminder of how I've been set free, there's a cross in bed.
you stand with me as we close in a time of prayer? Father, we just thank you for the incredible truth that we've been reminded of this morning through your scriptures, through the words of the song. Father, you are with us. We are never alone. Because of what you did on the cross, Jesus, you've healed what's broken in us and you restore what's broken between us, and now we can walk in this experience through life of being seen and known and loved. Father, we're so grateful for that. Would you give us the courage now to take the risk to be known? Whatever step we need to take this week toward that kind of community, Father, give us the courage to take it. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, Cypress. Have a beautiful week. We'll see you back here next Sunday.